Yeah, hello everybody. Shannon, that was really, really a nice program you put together.
Oh, thank you. It's always fun.
There we go. Okay. Yeah, and thank you everybody on the survey who has done such a great job this year and past years putting the data together. We now have a data set from 2021 to 2025 that's under that has been the surveys have been performed and the data has been put into the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife system. And that is our cleanest data. And that's what pretty much I'll be showing tonight. I assume you can see the first page of this.
We can. Looks good.
Thank you. So you all who do the survey know this like the back of your hands. The data we collect, Pigu population counts, we log visits to burrows with no prey, we log prey deliveries, and we do our best to identify what type of prey is being delivered. We record disturbances and tide information, and hopefully we make notes about weather conditions that make it difficult for you to count Pigu or to see deliveries. These are a few, the main people who use our data, and it's really great that Sarah is here tonight to talk about what the University of Washington is doing right now. There's the volunteer data from 2025 this year. We were 7 regions this year, covering 8 counties, maybe 9. I'm not sure I have my geography right with South Sound. We had 243 beach volunteers. 65 colonies were surveyed, which is that's about average for us. 765 surveys performed and nearly 5,300 volunteer hours. So those numbers are pretty staggering, really. Can you imagine paying for such a survey? This chart on the right here shows the number of surveys per week that we did. So we were around probably averaging about 60 during the heart of the season. I want to cover just a couple of definitions here before we dive into the data. So it'll hopefully make the data more understandable. We identify the Pigu population as the sum of the maximum PG count at each colony for each region over the length of the season. So it's not a single day count that establishes the population. It can be different colonies have different maximums on different survey weeks, but we sum all of those up, and that's how we arrive at the Pigu population. An active burrow is a burrow that we've seen a PG entering with or without prey. And when we talk about the data, we consider that an attempt to breed. It's very difficult sometimes to tell whether a PG is actually entering a burrow. So this is a tough data point. The percent attempting to breed is 2, which are the parents or hopeful parents, times the number of active burrows divided by the Pigu population. A chick burrow, of course, is a burrow into which a Pigu has delivered prey. And when we talk about breeding in the data, we're talking about successful breeding, which means prey has been delivered to a burrow. Percent successfully breeding are the 2 parents times the number of chick burrows we've identified divided by the Pigu population. And the last one here, reproductive success. We don't have any definite markers for what allows fledging to occur, but one that we can use is how many weeks there are between the first and the last delivery to a burrow. And later on, in this data, you'll see that we use 4 weeks as a marker. 4 weeks between surveys, or 4 weeks between first and last, which is 28 days. And we assume there is some probably time on the front end of that and on the back end, because we're only sampling. We don't really know what is happening. Here's a snapshot of the PG data for the season. The population we had was 2,149 birds. And some of the calcs are done with only 1,977 birds, because some colonies we have, we don't monitor burrows because they're too difficult to identify where they are. So we count the PGs there, and we also count the deliveries and the delivery type of prey. 521 active burrows, 300 chick burrows, and we saw 1,338 prey delivered. I'd like to see those all in a pile just to get a sense of what that looks like. But it's a pretty good number of little fish and an occasional shrimp and crab. The circle over here shows kind of the relative sizes of the populations at the different regions. And it's not really the populations at the regions, because again, we are sampling. So it has a lot to do with the number of colonies that you are surveying. But a lot of the numbers, because Whidbey is so large and has so many colonies, a lot of the numbers are kind of skewed by the Whidbey data. So in this presentation, what I've done is scaled a lot of the numbers into percents, so that each region is represented by a percent, which kind of levels out all of the data. Here's the PG population over 2021 through 2025. And you can see it's relatively steady. We tend to monitor about the same number of colonies each year. So you would hope that the population would be steady, or at least not declining. But this doesn't mean that the population is climbing. It just might mean that we are surveying more colonies. And in 2022, we inducted Jefferson County East into our survey, so their data has been added from 2022 on. These are a couple of charts you've probably all seen before. This chart on the left is again from 2021 to 2025, and it shows on the bottom line here, it shows the percentage of the Pigu population that is breeding, which means they've actually have chick burrows. And above that is the percentage of the population that has attempted to breed. So that's based on the active burrows that have been identified. And basically over time, this about 30% of the PG population successfully breeding, producing chicks. That's been a pretty good number. It's up a little bit from some prior years, but pretty much around 30%. And this attempting to breed number is usually around 50%. On the right here, we see the breeding percentages by region, and there are compared to 2025 compared to the last 4 years, the previous 4 years, And this year, it's about, probably a lot like usual, like other years. You see the SSGN over on the right here. So overall, we're about where we normally are in the successful breeding category, around 30%. So one of the things we always wonder about is how many chicks are being produced. We don't have any good way of knowing that. The University of Washington is visiting how to tease out what's really happening with the population, and that data is really important to knowing whether there is a declining population, a steady population, or an increasing population, and our data is helping with that analysis. So, but one thing we can look at are the number of weeks between the first and last prey deliveries. Presumably, if you only saw one prey delivery to a burrow in a season, you would think, well, not very likely that that was producing fledglings. But if you saw a delivery 1 week and maybe the next week and maybe not the next 2 weeks, but then again the following week, if you saw a number of deliveries over a number of weeks, that probably indicates a very higher percentage or likelihood that that burrow produced fledglings. So this chart on the left here is a comparison between the percent of chick burrows that had down here, the indicated at the bottom, the indicated number of weeks between the first and last observation. And this number is pretty high. This means where you have 0, it means for those chick burrows, which is for 2025 is 34% of 300 chick burrows. Those had a single delivery. It was never seen again during the season to have a delivery. So probably strong likelihood that those burrows were not producing fledglings. But as you increase the number of weeks that you've seen deliveries or between the first and last delivery, you start beginning to think, yeah, there's a good chance. And you've all this season, I'm sure you've all seen burrows where the fish keep getting bigger and week after week they're delivered, and finally there are no more deliveries. Well, you kind of suspect that the fledgling dropped out of that burrow and made it to the water. And we start seeing the fledglings later in the season. So as we're out here with maybe 4 weeks between first and last delivery, or 5 weeks between the first and last delivery, or even more, that's probably good territory for reproduction of the species. The right-hand side is just the same 2020 chart here, but with the actual numbers of burrows for each category. 2025. And this is the same information, but shown for each of our regions. And Dashon breaks the bank on this one. But it's because it was a single burrow that did exceed 4 weeks between the first and last delivery. Kitsap had a really successful breeding season. The rest of us kind of normal, down for 4 or more weeks between the first and last delivery, down around 20-25% generally. And the overall, the average over the 5 years for the SSGN is just over 25%, about 26%. So this year we're at about 22% in this category. So another indicator of how well the season is going for the Pigeon might be provisioning of chick burrows. And that's why it's so important that we're doing what we're doing. We get that information. So on the left-hand side here, 2021 to 2025, they're all, 4.1 to 4.4 chicks delivered per chicks. That would be wonderful. Fish delivered per chick burrow. So that's a pretty steady number. Our data goes back well farther than this, and these numbers are pretty consistent. A little drop the last 2 years over 2023, but I would say that's probably not significant, but something we would want to monitor in succeeding years. And on the right-hand side, the distribution of deliveries to burrows. This is the percent of chick burrows. The vertical is percent of chick burrows that received the indicated number of prey delivered in a season. So for this year, we were just, if you look at the first blue bar, we were just under 40% of chick burrows that received only 1 or 2 deliveries during the season. And this is also a likely indicator of the burrow success. See, as you move down this chart, we get into 3 or 4 deliveries per season, 5 and 6, 7 and 8, and on and on. And as you get out here, that's a lot of deliveries, probably a lot of weeks. Probably a greater success that we're getting fledglings. And of course, we monitor the type of prey. In 2025, the Pigeon delivered 821 gunnel, 392 sculpin, and 133 other. And so 2021 through 2025, you can see pretty steady percentages of each. Usually a little bit over 60% of gunnels and 30%, a little less than 30% of sculpin, and about 10% of other. And with respect to each region, this is 2025 compared to it is 2025, excuse me. So the blue is the gunnel, the orange is sculpin, and gray is other. And this year is a little different than normal. These colonies, Camino, Clallam, Jefferson, and Kitsap, usually have a very high percentage of gunnel, and they did again this year. South Sound, though, had a higher percentage of sculpin than normal. So that's interesting, and it'll be interesting to see what happens next year with them. But Vashon and Whidbey are about as we always are, and Whidbey sometimes, occasionally, has had more sculpin delivered than gunnel. Usually it's a little bit more gunnel. And the primary gunnel majority colonies on Whidbey are all on the west side of the island. And I know there's a little study there waiting to be undertaken to figure out why that is. This is the time distribution of prey deliveries. So each marker is the percent of the total amount of prey that was delivered during the season during that particular survey. So if we're looking at the 2022 through 2024 data, which is the blue line, if we look at this peak here, the 723 week of surveys, we see that we're at about 17% of the total number of prey that were delivered during those seasons were delivered. 17% were delivered during that week. And these curves are really, really steady. If you put all the years over one another, you get a very nice curve like this. Usually a little slopier on the earlier stage and a little more steep on the back end. And so at Whidbey, and I don't know about the other colonies, but we felt that we had a slower starting season this year than normal. And this curve would agree with that. That historically, during the preceding 4 years, we had more deliveries earlier than we did this year because the orange line is underneath the blue line in this area. And we have differences between regions as well. I took a look at, when do the different regions hit their peak, and it looks like South Sound hits their peak probably nearly 2 weeks ahead of when Whidbey and Clallam and Jefferson hit theirs. I'll take a deeper look at that eventually, but it's interesting. It does seem that the northern colonies or more inland colonies have earlier peaks, which you might think would be due to some kind of temperature component, but there's more to be done there. We also monitor disturbances, and this circle on the pie chart on the right shows that eagles predominate in our disturbances. And this is 2025, and I looked at the 2024 data, and it was also 41% of disturbances were eagles. And if you compare the left chart to the right chart, which shows the percent of disturbance duration for the entire season for the total SSGN, you see that eagles accounted for over half of the total upset time for the pigeon guillemots. So eagles are the highest causation of disturbances, and their disturbances have the greatest impact. It is nice seeing them, though. It's just a plug for all of us who would wish they would fly away as soon as we get there. And then you've all felt this, I'm sure, how quickly the season ends. Everything is going along great, and then all of a sudden everybody leaves town. And this chart shows the counts for each week, population counts for each week of the season, and then in about mid-August, everybody leaves, and we start thinking about how much fun the season has been and how disappointing it is that we may only have 2 surveys left, which are really fun surveys, by the way, but it's also really fun watching the Pigeon. Just a few quick hits for the season. The first observed delivery was June 2nd, and that was at Jefferson East at Snake Rock Estates. And I'm sure curious about the name of that place. The last observed delivery was September 8th at Whidbey Keystone Borough P1. And the most weeks between the first and last delivery to a borough was 10. at Whidbey Double Bluff. And obviously something's happening there. They did not kick out the teenager. Or maybe it's multiple families, or maybe another breeding attempt, who knows what happened there, but 10 is more than is needed. Most deliveries to a burrow in a single survey was 9 at Whidbey Lake Hancock North. And I'm excited to see a burrow get 3 deliveries in a survey. I can't even imagine how much fun 9 must have been and how crazy it was as well. Most deliveries to a burrow during the season, 17. Whidbey Keystone Burrow J2. That is a burrow that's in the Jetty Rocks, right where the Port Townsend to Keystone Ferry comes in. And the most weeks surveyed, 17, South Sound Big Fish Trap and Whidbey Keystone. And that's a third of a year. I know we talk about 10 weeks minimum. That's just to get you interested in the surveying. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dave. That was wonderful. And it's so neat to finally see the graphs and see the numbers on the page. We always have these questions and, like you said, wondering about if the season was slow to start. So it's really great to be able to see that. I did see one question here. Hal asked, how do you count a situation where we had three pig delivered fish within a minute? And I'm not sure which part of the presentation that referred to, but
the question, let me look at it here. How do you account for the situation where you have three fish delivered to the same burrow?
Right. You delivered fish within 1 minute.
How do we account for that? I mean, I don't think we really know, but we sure do suspect that there are 2 mating pairs in there, but we don't count it as 2 mating pairs. And I don't know, that's certainly worth having a discussion about.
Yeah, I think we've seen a few burrows where we've suspected it could be a 2-bedroom condo because of the activity. So
yeah,
I think it's possible.
yeah, I'm sure our numbers underpredict the number of chick burrows.